2024, a year when cinemas, much like the rest of the world, saw drama, triumph, disaster, and even more sequels, live-action remakes, and reimaginings than anybody could possibly have asked for. Hollywood spent another year trying to convince us that creativity wasn't dead, whilst touting artificial intelligence so hard it's a wonder we're all not staring down the barrel of another Terminator Lego sequel. All the while wrestling with a record-low box office, labour strikes, and the continuing mystery of why seemingly nobody can make a good video game movie. I'm Van Connor, and this is Roll Credits, a look back on 12 months of chaos, joy, and Jason Statham going John Wick for the elderly. With Saltburn having hit Prime Video over Christmas and building social media chatter thanks to its racy content and sexualization of plug holes, it was going to take something deliciously twisted to start 2024 off right. And so, kicking the year off with a chuckle and following the template set by Winnie the Pooh, creatives were delighted to start the year with Walt Disney's iconic Steamboat Willie entering the public domain. The animated short, which introduced the character we'd come to know as Mickey Mouse to the world, was now fair game for anybody to use. So naturally, the trailer for a Mickey Mouse-themed horror movie dropped within hours. Mickey's Mouse Hunt went on to be released direct-to-home platforms at the end of September. Nobody noticed.
We trap him, we beat his ass.
The year's new film releases started on the standard seasonal Oscars roll, with the UK release of Sofia Coppola's Priscilla, having premiered at the Venice Film Festival all the way back in September. The film proved faintly controversial for 5 minutes thanks to its rather unflattering depiction of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, played for the screen by Euphoria and Saltburn hunk Jacob Elordi. Priscilla Presley herself produced the film, which peels back the glitzy veneer of Elvis's world to reveal the claustrophobia of life as Priscilla Presley. Critics fell over themselves for the film's restraint, though the lack of any actual Elvis music, turned down by the Presley estate naturally, made even its biggest fans mutter into their blue suede shoes.
I want a life of my own.
You'd think it'd be a bold move to make an Elvis movie without Elvis's music, but in a year that'd go on to see not only an Omen prequel and not only one but 3 Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-offs, who can say anymore? Typically seen as a solid precursor for Oscar predictions, the BAFTA nominations were announced to now pretty standard outrage when the film leading the year's pack, the decidedly American Oppenheimer, kicked off the now requisite debate of why we even pretend the B in BAFTA's anything more than a suggestion at this stage. Meanwhile, George Clooney put his director's hat back on for The Boys in the Boat, a Depression-era rowing drama that made Chariots of Fire look like a Michael Bay movie. Think Rocky for rowing with Joel Edgerton as Mickey.
That was a beautiful speech, Coach.
Yikes. Picking the mood up though, Jason Statham came to play, fulfilling the required January trash fun action spot taken up the year previous by Jared Butler's Plane. This time out, the Stath was the Beekeeper, in which his standard retired Black Ops agent archetype avenges his murdered friend by emerging from the most random cover profession in cinematic history, beekeeping. The film was a ridiculous, hyper-violent metaphor for so many things, up to and including a shot of Hunter Biden, that between its fun and frenzied action sequences and Statham growling, it left no real time for thinking and buzzed its way to a nice, healthy bit of box office.
Who the fuck are you, Winnie the Pooh?
I keep bees.
Yorgos Lanthimos, meanwhile, continued his winning streak of recent years with Poor Things, essentially Sexy Frankenstein, in which Emma Stone, who won an Oscar for her role, plays a reanimated Victorian woman with the brain of a newborn baby, discovering life and sex. A concept so bonkers when you stop to think about it, it's almost obnoxious how well made it is to boot.
I must go punch that baby.
Then there was The Holdovers, Alexander Payne's Christmas set drama that was released at the end of October in the US, but dumped into January in the UK, just as Paul Giamatti's grumptastic lead began to gain traction on the awards circuit. It was a right banger too. The holdovers was largely ignored by audiences though, so much so that staff at a cinema in Brazil at the start of February would manage to accidentally ignore an entire screen full of people even watching it, turning off all the lights and locking 40 people in the building whilst they buggered off home. And then there was All of Us Strangers, Andrew Haigh's haunting and beautiful meditation on grief and love, that really wasn't seen by anyone and seemed to exist just to appease the Cardigan squad of critics and look pretty for Oscar voters. True to form, it got nominated for 6 BAFTAs, but you'll never find a member of the public who remember anything about it.
Don't scare you.
No?
Also in January were not 1 but 2 feature musicals, both based on existing properties, with the feature adaptation of Mean Girls' stage musical arriving a mere 9 days before Blitz Badawale's big screen take on The Color Purple. A big old sweeping adaptation of the Broadway show, The Color Purple cemented its place as an Oscar frontrunner with powerhouse performances, lavish production, and a scene-stealing turn from Taraji P. Henson. But it would wind up winning just a single nomination for Best Supporting Actress for Danielle Brooks.
I loves Hoppo. God knows I do. But I'll kill him dead before I let him or anybody beat me.
Going on to win the Oscar for Best International Feature, Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest kicked off February with a haunting contemplation on the banality of evil set against the backdrop of Auschwitz. Shot like Big Brother for the Holocaust, Zone of Interest was as chilling as it was unrelenting. So it felt a migration to lighten the mood somewhat, with an animated tale of ducks flying south for the winter. Effectively National Lampoon's Vacation, animated with ducks and featuring Kumail Nanjiani voicing the dad.
Come on, we gotta get ready.
Mac, ready for what?
Nothing, just, for our big, super fun family migration.
What?
The one and only Carl Weathers passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 76. The kids will mostly know him now for playing Greef Karga in The Mandalorian. But to generations of people around the world, he'll always be Apollo Creed.
Damn, Ron, come on! What's the matter with you?
Tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow!
And Chubbs Peterson, obviously.
We've only just begun to live.
Rocking his established house style, meanwhile, with the most boilerplate of executions, Matthew Vaughn's Argyle dropped and then sank like a stone just a week into February. Reportedly costing more than $200 million, everybody hated it and made less than $100 million back, and it was the first of several slaps in the face for Apple's feature film label in 2024.
See, I said the truth.
Who's the weirdo now?
Not a real fan. Don't worry. I have it all under control.
Things weren't going great over at Disney either, with returning CEO Bob Iger taking one look at how his successor Bob Chapek had left things and deciding that making money was better. So, as part of the Disney shareholder meeting, he announced that not only would there now be an animated sequel to Moana, but there'd be sequels in 9 months. Making no bones about it being actually a re-edited and expanded cut of an in-production Disney Plus spin-off series. It got released in November and it made just about all the money. Back in February though, Lionsgate quietly slipped the Zac Efron true story wrestling drama The Iron Claw into cinemas. Sean Durkin's tale of the Von Erich wrestling family and the infamous curse that saw so many of the WWE Hall of Famers pass before their time, The Iron Claw was pretty cheaply made, and so was a profitable one at just $45 million worldwide. The film would generally be thought of quite highly, but writer-director Sean Durkin would take flack from wrestling aficionados for neglecting certain elements and entire events, justifying the exclusion of another ill-fated character in the story with, "There's a repetition that's just hard to take."
Do you think you know why you're sad?
Well, I guess it's because I used to be a brother. I'm not a brother anymore.
Meanwhile, amidst one of the most outright funny press tours of recent years, in which its own star seemingly couldn't stop shit-talking it, Madam Web attempted to expand Sony's Spider-Man spin-off universe with Dakota Johnson as a clairvoyant superhero. The result was convoluted storytelling, ropey CGI, one of the most visibly ADR performances in a Hollywood movie in years, and one of the most iconic lines of 2024.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
But joining Madam Web to form the strangest Valentine's Day multiplex lineup in years was the Bob Marley biopic One Love. It was a pretty standard by-the-numbers biopic, but rising star Kingsley Ben-Adir drew decent praise for his turn as Bob Marley, and, understandably enough, One Love would go on to have the biggest opening day box office of all time in Jamaica, with the record haul of $100,000.
We're jamming. To think that jamming was a thing of the past.
Winner of the year's Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar, American Fiction arrived in the UK in February. It had a brilliant lead in Jeffrey Wright, and Cord Jefferson's debut feature was a scathing, balls-out hilarious critique of both the publishing industry and its stereotyping of black authors.
Well, I just find that word really offensive.
With all due respect, Brittany, I got over it. I'm pretty sure you can too.
In real-world Glasgow, meanwhile, Family Day Out Willie's Chocolate Experience opened to the public and a disastrous reception. The ramshackle operation immediately drew comparisons to the ill-fated Fire Festival. A horror movie, The Unknown, was announced a week later. And by November, the man behind it all, who'd used AI-generated concept art to lure in punters, was on the sex offenders registry. And they say entrepreneurship is dead in Brexit-era Britain. March roared into action with Dune Part 2, Denis Villeneuve's sprawling, visually stunning continuation of his epic adaptation of Frank Herbert's epically unfilmable novel, Dune.
May thy knife chip and shatter. May thy knife chip and shatter.
Timothée Chalamet brooded, Zendaya actually got some screen time, and sandworms became 2024's answer to Baby Yoda. Not really, they became a sex toy popcorn meme. And kicked off a new, entirely garish but fun revenue stream in which every tentpole movie releases a competing OTT popcorn bucket, with a sideline in which can veer closest to being an outright sex toy. Daughter of the late great Robin Williams, Zelda Williams made her feature directorial debut with the Diablo Cody scripted Lisa Frankenstein, a sort of neo-drenched reimagining of Mary Shelley's classic that sits halfway between Jennifer's Body and 1994's My Boyfriend's Back. It was a pretty fun and neat little bit of camp horror rom-comedy.
Do you like this, song?
Strangely, the week leading up to the Oscars this year would turn out to be a pretty quiet one. Or at least it was for everyone except Amazon, who released not one but two high-profile releases back-to-back in early March, starting with the release of Doug Liman's remake of Roadhouse. Putting an MMA spin on the iconic 80s hit, Roadhouse 2024 would star Jake Gyllenhaal and be very well received by action fans, even proving something of a minor crossover success through unified mockery of how spectacularly terrible real-world fighter Conor McGregor was as its villain. There have been minor controversies surrounding the release of Roadhouse by Amazon Studios, with the film having originally been developed under MGM before their sale to the retail titan, who then predictably decided their own streaming platform would be a more beneficial home for all involved than stuffy old cinemas. Director Doug Liman took issue with that, threatening to boycott the film's premiere and going so far as to screen the movie for Amazon kingpin Jeff Bezos himself on his boat. Bezos was unmoved, the streaming release stuck, and Lyman would ultimately turn up to the premiere. But he refused to comb his hair and he left after 2 drinks. That last part's really just a guess. Personally, I think it was a banger and I demand they keep making sequels until Eric Roberts joins the cast.
Oh, I just slapped you. Are you alright? What? Damn! Fuck him up.
Amazon's second offering, though, took Zac Efron, fresh off of the Iron Claw, for a bit of a streaming comedic palate cleanser with the brotastic romp Ricky Stenicki. Efron and his on-screen besties were broadly forgettable in a comedy that pretty much felt like it belonged on Prime Video, but that gave us a great moment for the year in John Cena performing rock covers with masturbation lyrics.
Ooh, baby, I masturbate every day. I wanna tell you I masturbate every way.
Cena would of course go on to have more fun at his own expense mere days later, when the 96th Oscars finally rolled along. US chat show host and living Funko Pop Jimmy Kimmel hosted festivities for a 4th time. And the results were a foregone conclusion, with Oppenheimer leading the way, Ryan Gosling going impressively hard on a live performance of I'm Just Ken, despite not being nominated, and Al Pacino giving us all a moment to impersonate whenever you get a restaurant bill.
Here it comes. And may I see Oppenheimer? Yes. Yes, Emma Thomas, Charles Grodin.
Less amusing, though, was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, yet another attempt at keeping the nostalgia-powered franchise on life support that teamed up the returning characters of Lego sequel Ghostbusters Afterlife with the surviving OG Ghostbusters. And James Acaster. It wasn't terrifically well reviewed and it tapped out about 200 million global, but since it only cost 100 to make, that was just about enough of a success for a further Ghostbusters sequel to now be in the works.
Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters.
What? I'm sorry, what was it?
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters! Thankfully, the demonic and supernatural got a better ride elsewhere anyway, with March kicking off a trio of buzzy, popcorn-friendly horror flicks. The very same week that Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was released would also see the much quieter release of the Sydney Sweeney-led Immaculate. A fun bit of nun-tastic horror. It arrived in cinemas that week alongside Late Night with the Devil. A really fun, found-footage horror romp dressed up as a recovered 70s chat show Halloween special. Late Night with the Devil's got a great Stephen King novella feel about it. And it, Immaculate, and a fortnight later 70s prequel The First Omen, made for a fun little spooky trio. Late Night with the Devil gained 5 minutes notoriety too for achieving the unlikely box office haul of $666,666 on its first Sunday out in the US.
We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back after these messages.
The 4th installment of a series way bigger than we give it credit for, Kung Fu Panda 4 arrived and delivered pretty much exactly what you'd expect as regards entertainment, but took the Kung Fu Panda series over the $2 billion grosser mark. These movies aren't great, but they're pretty consistent in quality and box office, and definitely not the worst thing Jack Black did in 2024. From pandas to apes, with Godzilla x Kong the New Empire, a cartoonishly fun return to the Monsterverse that recently closed out the end of a first run of its Apple prequel series Monarch Legacy of Monsters, with Kurt and Wyatt Russell. The Godzilla v Kong sequel was, like the one before it, surprisingly successful at the box office, so we are absolutely getting another one in 2027.
Is that a mini Kong?
Then March came to a close with the news that Lou Gossett Jr. had passed away. He was 87 when he died, and he'd been the first black actor to win the Best Supporting Actor Oscar back in 1982 for his role in An Officer and a Gentleman. Though Lou Gossett Jr. will forever be lauded for his turns and roots and the colour purple, I think it's artistically important to appreciate his finest character work as Chappie Sinclair.
They're going in against the clock in a pair of borrowed F-16s.
Chappie, I hit it. Now just worry about the pre-makes that got up.
Dev Patel's directorial debut Monkey Man launched the April releases this year, a fun and grisly violent action ride. It wasn't a huge deal with audiences, but it had Jordan Peele championing it. It cost a tight and tidy 10 mil, banked 35, and gave Dev a shot at showing off some pretty hardcore action chops.
There you are. You are a beast.
Meanwhile, with Dev Patel taking his first venture behind the camera, Ex Machina director Alex Garland took what was said to be his last with Civil War. A grounded dystopian nightmare set in a contemporary America beset by a civil war spearheaded by an authoritarian Republican president, it was a real Sigourney Weaver moment for star Kirsten Dunst, and the second of 3 high-profile movies this year to feature Kaylee Spaney. Ask anyone what they remember most about the film, though, and Folding Money says they mentioned Jesse Plemons' brilliant appearance as a militant MAGA lunatic.
I'm just saying.
Just saying, just what?
Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you?
Hoping to bag some of that sweet, sweet Bohemian Rhapsody cash, the incredibly ITV-looking Amy Winehouse biopic Back to Black garnered mixed reviews at best. At worst, drawing particular ire from fans for whitewashing certain parties and reframing events. It didn't help that the film was rubbish.
Thought you had so many lessons to learn. I say you don't know what.
Abigail offered up some B-level schlock horror fun meanwhile in April, though most of that fun was spoilt by its own marketing campaign. Avoid the trailer, don't read the synopsis, it's one of those that's best enjoyed completely cold. Trust me.
Sammy, those are fucking onions.
And closing out April in style was Luca Guadagnino's buzzy tennis three-way drama Challengers. Starring Zendaya as the F in an MFM love triangle in the world of professional tennis, Challengers bounced around the release schedules for nearly a year, thanks to the 2023 actors' strike ruling its sexy cast out of promoting it. And promote it they did, with Challengers becoming very much the TikTok zeitgeist film of its moment, thanks to some sizzling sex appeal between the trio, inventive camera work and stylish editing, and an instantly iconic score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Are you on Facebook?
What?
He's asking for your number. And so am I.
The first summer movie of the year, the Ryan Gosling-led feature adaptation of the 80s TV show The Fall Guy, had the weight of expectation on it when it arrived at the start of May. Expectation the very expensive action didn't measure up to an opening weekend. However, it began to become a buzzy, low-key sleeper in the following couple of weeks, and all could have been a little rosier, had it not then been made available on streaming 2.5 weeks after opening in cinemas. William Castle must be spinning in his grave.
He's missing. We need you to find him.
Why me?
You're a stuntman. No one's gonna notice whether you're here or not. No offense.
I mean, some taken.
One of the year's best movies was St. Maud director Rose Glass's second feature, Love Lies Bleeding. A sweaty, visceral romantic crime thriller set around a backwater bodybuilding gym. Kristen Stewart's great in it. But it's Andor actress Katie O'Brien who just outright steals the show, ahead of a terrifically insane third act.
So where did you appear from? Oklahoma. I've never been anywhere but here.
Picking up where 2018's War for the Planet of the Apes left off, a Legacy-sequel trilogy began with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the latest installment of the now 5-decade-plus saga of primates versus humanity. Kingdom didn't get the kudos of either of the previous Andy Serkis movies, but it was decently liked by critics and made enough worldwide to be deemed a moderate success, one worth continuing in another chapter.
What a wonderful day! What a wonderful day!
Continuing the development of his rebranding into a sort of aspiring Mr. Rogers figure over the pandemic, John Krasinski wrote, produced, directed, and co-starred in the big-budget family movie If, ahead of the spring school holiday. It'd get mixed reviews from critics and become a box office bomb, but Krasinski would go on to get a theatrical Jack Ryan spin-off movie out of Amazon and be crowned People magazine's sexiest man alive in November. So I don't imagine he's too broken up about it.
And Mom said too much candy isn't good for your tummy, but I said, oh my God.
Wow, my eyes can taste it.
I am so sorry.
You don't taste that in your eyeballs?
Elsewhere, prior to its premiere at this year's Cannes Film Festival, the rather unflattering true story Donald Trump drama The Apprentice, which had been desperately searching for a distributor who wasn't afraid of the Trump team suing them, finally found a UK distributor in Studio Canal. It'd go on to find a US home with indie label Briarcliff, as long after as August. Its troubles didn't end there, but more on that later. Before then, we had to get through the 77th Cannes Film Festival itself, which took up the second half of May and kicked off with Sean Baker's Anora, bagging its world premiere there and going home with the Palme d'Or. Another film to have its premiere at the festival was George Miller's highly anticipated Mad Max spin-off Furiosa. With Anya Taylor-Joy standing in as a younger Charlize Theron, audiences sadly failed to show up for the Fury Road prequel. And despite a very fun Chris Hemsworth villain, Furiosa became another high-profile box office bomb for the year.
You fabulous thing.
Things were starting to look bleak for the post-COVID, post-strike industry as the box office receipts pointed towards record lows. But all was not lost, and an unlikely morale boost emerged by way of the mostly dreaded animated Garfield movie, being released by Sony with Chris Pratt voicing the lead. About as basic bitchy Secret Life of Pets alike as you'd expect, the Garfield movie cost Sony $60 million to produce, but bagged them a cheeky $250. It was a single flower amongst the waste field of the summer box office to that point.
Does she need to announce it to the whole office?
Of course, not wanting the buzzy industry action of Cannes to subside, Netflix took to the close of the festival to announce the fresh ensemble casting of the upcoming Glass Onion threequel Wake Up Dead Man. Ultimately, Josh O'Connor, Kaylee Spaney, Andrew Scott, Kerry Washington, Glenn Close, Jeremy Renner, Mila Kunis, Daryl McCormick, Josh Brolin, and Thomas Hayden Church will be announced for the latest Benoit Blanc mystery. But no whodunit reveal could possibly be as satisfying as October's events, when star Daniel Craig responded to being told that theatrical releases aren't part of the model by Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos, by Stone Cold telling Sarandos, "Your model is fucked." He spoke for an entire industry that day. Also fucked, though stuck with seeing May out on a whimper, was Young Woman and the Sea, a true story drama about the first woman to swim across the English Channel, starring Daisy Ridley. Disney had originally planned to release the pretty boilerplate biographical drama straight to streaming on Disney+, but they changed their minds and gave it a limited theatrical run after some apparently positive test screenings. Then revealed they weren't going to be reporting box office numbers for it. Just gonna leave that there.
You think I could do it? Do you think I can?
With a big bang needed to jumpstart the summer box office in June, one low-key banger came from Will Smith and Martin Lawrence on the fourth Bad Boys movie, Ride or Die.
Are y'all still in our clothes?
Just because we black, we still in your shit? What?
Look at your shirt.
Why don't you sing us a little Reba song?
Reba.
Sing your favorite.
It's good enough fun, if a bit silly once it starts getting existential. But it's got great action from directors Adil and Bilal, and it was the hit Will Smith had been waiting for since becoming a tarnished brand for, well, you know. Another name that emerged in full force in 2024 was that of M. Night Shyamalan, whose two daughters each got their first go on the big stage this year. Singer-daughter Salika would make her acting debut in Dear Old Dad's Trap later in August, but firstly, younger sister Ishana Night Shyamalan, who'd previously served as M. Night's second unit director on Old and Knock at the Cabin, would make her directorial debut with The Watchers from producer M. Night Shyamalan, naturally. It got bad reviews and it bombed. Having set the unlikely template for what then get done to Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh is back in a second horror outing in the trash micro-budget Blood and Honey splatter franchise. what go on to become retroactively labeled a component of the in-production larger Twisted Childhood universe, or more commonly, Pooniverse. The comparatively crap second movie is at least an observable leap up from the more rushed-on-to-released first film. At one point it features Simon Callow genuinely trying to class up a Winnie the Pooh horror movie. One of the more highbrow cinephiles jumped on this month was Viggo Mortensen's second film as director, The Dead Don't Hurt. Mortensen also wrote, produced, and starred in this proper high-end take on the old-fashioned western, and it's a badass revenge drama with superb performances. Pixar returned to the world of emotions with Inside Out 2, a perfectly fine sequel that mostly just felt a bit samey. It was, however, a massive smash hit. It was the first movie of the year to open above 100 million, and even though it cost 200 million to make, it banked near 2 billion by the start of December. It's a foregone conclusion that there'll be a third Inside Out, presumably featuring a college-age Riley, and new emotions like feral horniness and cocaine confidence.
What was your name again? Oh, I'm sorry. I can get ahead of myself. I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions, and we are just super jazzed to be here. Where can I put my stuff?
All-timer villain, 70s badass, and dad of Kiefer, Donald Sutherland died after a long illness in June at the age of 88. He died having 198 acting credits at his name, alongside 2 Golden Globes, 1 Emmy, 5 children, and 2 years hooking up with Barbarella-era Jane Fonda. Meanwhile, with no Mission Impossible or Transformers movie to bolster their summer this year, Paramount shot their shot at blockbuster season with A Quiet Place Day One, a prequel about the original alien invasion that began the whispery 2018 horror series. A box office hit, Day One starred Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, and was directed by Michael Sarnowski, who'd previously made the Nicolas Cage movie Pig. Originally, Day One had been going to have been written and directed by Jeff Nichols, who completely by chance had his latest movie, The Bike Riders, land in cinemas a week earlier. The Bike Riders was a Goodfellas-like chronicle of one of the early outlaw biker clubs, starring Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, and Tom Hardy in squinty older brother mode. It was a box office dud, but a great movie.
What the hell were you thinking back there? Nothing. I saw you scoring off with them guys. What do I need to think for? Yeah, you and me, kid.
It seemed like audiences who weren't turning up for The Bike Riders were hitting up Inside Out 2 instead, because the only other thing released opposite it was The Exorcism, bizarrely Russell Crowe's second Exorcist movie in 2 years. It would come out that The Exorcism had been filmed prior to the pandemic, and that after The Pope's Exorcist saw Crowe make a decent chunk of change doing the Vesper Ghostbuster shtick with the silly accent, that they could do some reshoots 4.5 later and cash right on in. It did not pan out. Hanging the entire thing on the star appeal of Russell Crowe just was not enough to lure in an audience in 2024.
When it happens, run.
A lesson similarly learned by Kevin Costner in June, with the release of the first 3-hour installment of 4-film passion project Horizon, an American Saga. Overlong as a single picture, let alone 4 entire movies, Horizon was funded entirely by Costner and outside investment, with increasingly wayward studio Warner Brothers handling distribution, but very little in the way of marketing. As such, what could have been one of the most epic dad movies of all time came and went at the box office with barely a glimmer, and the resulting financial disappointment saw Chapter 1 pushed quickly to streaming, and the release date for Chapter 2 pulled entirely. Production on Chapter 3 has, at the time of transmission, yet to resume. I bloody liked Horizon, though. Though one production the world may have been better off having had shut down was that of Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness. A so-called triptych of tales, which is to say 3 completely unconnected, boring-ass shorts that all star Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe, Kinds of Kindness screams of the sort of pandering cardigan critic nonsense you only get to fart out with your famous mates once you reach a certain point of no-return combination level of awards credibility, financial success, guardian-penned rim jobs, and organ-eroding pretension.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for the news, yeah.
riding in as a further harbinger of the shit-tacular state of the modern film industry, though. July's first summer blockbuster came from bloody Netflix. So it was adding insult to injury then that it was also with the return of Eddie Murphy in the action-comedy Lego sequel, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F.
It was damn good fun, though. And yet again, something that would have been huge 20 years ago is given away straight to streaming.
I'm seriously about to pass out right now. No, you ain't. Hey! No! Man, what the hell? Fly this fucking helicopter right now! Going out my face. I will shoot you in your face if you outside the helicopter. I'll shoot you, then I'm gonna shoot myself, because I ain't dying in no helicopter crash.
Representative of an equally transitionary period of film was Maxine, the final chapter of Ty West's trilogy following X and Pearl, which did come to cinemas just a couple of days later. This third one's set in 1980s LA and follows Mia Goth's Maxine as she seeks stardom in VHS horror culture.
It's really good fun. Mia Goth's just otherworldly, like from a different planet.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Do you mind taking your top off so we can see your breasts?
Yeah, sure.
But one has to ask what planet the creators of the also-released Hundreds of Beavers were on when they cut up that mock silent era live-action Looney Tune. A real one-of-a-kind, Hundreds of Beavers is about a fur trapper going to war against
Hundreds of Beavers.
slapstick goofery incarnate. Instant cult classic. Despicable Me 4 turned out to be both the predictable earner and predictable bore.
Essentially a sixth spin of the Minionverse dice. It made bank, but good God, it felt obligatory.
Thanks, Ron.
So it felt like a nice little palate cleanser then to follow that up with a pair of buzzy new horror releases. Firstly, with the terrifically fun Inner Violent Nature, a largely dialogue-free slasher shown from the killer's perspective. The movie played like Gus Van Sant's Friday the 13th, and a sequel would go on to be announced at the year's San Diego Comic-Con. Far buzzier, though, was Longlegs, Osgood Perkins' psychic Silence of the Lambs riff that brought the directorial heft, but got lost beneath a next-level nuts Nicolas Cage performance.
Horror diehards couldn't get enough, though, and low-key buzz around the film kept it a minor but consistent box office earner until it became the highest-grossing original horror movie of the entire year.
Like a mop. Like a rat.
Less of a success, though, was Apple's latest release, Fly Me to the Moon, another streaming release diverted to theatrical after positive test screenings.
That positivity did not pay off, and the 60-set NASA rom-com wound up failing to make back even half of its insane $100 million budget.
It was supposed to be a contingency plan. That's how he sold it. It was an insurance policy.
In case we failed.
But it was the two tentpoles to close out that everybody expected to own July that also wound up presenting an interesting test case this year in 90s nostalgia versus 21st century franchising. First was Lee Isaac Chung's refreshingly disconnected Twister sequel, which sold as an old-fashioned star-making term for Glenn Powell, as well as the revival of a pretty beloved 90s title as IP.
Hell, Twisters was such a 90s throwback, it even came with a forgettable female lead and a banging theme song. Of course, no year of contemporary cinema can really be discussed without bringing up Marvel Studios.
At one time, the live-action answer to Pixar, the now Disney-owned superhero label, had been floundering following the chapter-ending mega tentpole that had been the fourth Avengers movie, Endgame, in 2019. The onslaught of one badly received project after another, despite the occasional gem emerging, in addition to mounting allegations and legal controversy surrounding the villain of their next big cinematic storyline, led to unexpected scenes at the year's San Diego Comic-Con, with the outright cancellation of the upcoming 5th Avengers movie, The Kang Dynasty, and a shift toward a new villain with the now retitled Avengers Doomsday. Yes, no less than 5 years after killing off the universe-launching hero Tony Stark in Endgame, Robert Downey Jr. will be returning to play the next Thanos-level franchise threat, legendary baddie Doctor Doom. In their first year in over a decade to see just a single release, Marvel received immediate groans of confusion for their troubles, and accusations of creative bankruptcy would soon begin to surface, done no favors by details arising of just how much Downey stood to be paid for this clearly creative first endeavor. For a minute, it seemed Marvel had reached a new low for box-ticking fan service. And then, in December, it was announced Chris Evans would also be returning for Doomsday as a new iteration of Captain America. The House of Ideas had seemingly run out of them. Not that Marvel themselves cared, they had Deadpool and Wolverine to close out the month. And it was huge, riding a marketing campaign the scale of which hadn't been seen in decades, and a press tour that played heavily on the seemingly natural chemistry of its leads.
Get your spectral sock out, nerds. It's gonna get good.
Deadpool and Wolverine went on to be the second highest grossing film of the year after Inside Out 2, and gave the world the joy of the Gambit meme.
You know how long I've been waiting for this? Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
One fall-off that should be studied from 2024 was that of Shazam and Tangled alum Zachary Levi. Following the catastrophic reception to Harold and the Purple Crayon, a $40 million live-action adaptation of a 1950s children's novel, at the start of August, Levi finally went off the deep end. There'd been right-wing anti-vax, MAGA-like flutters and tweets from Levi in the past, but with the failure of, again, the $40 million live-action adaptation of a 1950s children's novel, he went in hard on his support of Donald Trump and loudly quit the industry. Which, to be fair, is the sort of rash decision you can be forgiven for making if you've been made to sit through Harold and the Purple Crayon. One of those movies you could have forgotten before even reaching the lobby on the way out afterwards. Eli Roth's video game adaptation Borderlands was an early heavy hitter for Sony for August. But hit it did not. Absolutely crashing and burning at the box office, and failing spectacularly to cash in on the goodwill of Amazon's recently released adaptation of the Fallout series. Basically, it was a fucking mess.
I'm expelling the excess lead. I can't go if you're looking at me. Ooh, actually, scrap that. I can. I really can. Actually, it's helping.
Are we really ready for this to finish?
Keep looking at me.
Having produced The Watchers for daughter Ishana Knight back in June, M. Night Shyamalan brought the second of his daughters onto the big stage as a component of Hitchcockian and Josh Hartnett thriller Trap. A goofily enjoyable thriller that goes off the rails about halfway through. Josh Hartnett's a serial killer taking his tween daughter to a concert that he swiftly susses is being used as a trap by law enforcement to take him down. The second half's nowhere near as good as the first, but Trap made decent enough bank and everybody seemed to enjoy just how unhinged Josh Hartnett went with it.
You know the butcher? The freaking nut job that goes around just chopping people up? Well, the feds or whatever heard that he's gonna be here today, so they set up a trap for him.
Meanwhile, Hollywood found itself embroiled in yet another controversy as details emerged about several high-profile VFX houses struggling to meet impossible deadlines for summer blockbusters. Social media lit up with stories from overworked artists, leading to calls for unionization in the visual effects industry. One film that took an increasingly unique lean on its use of practical effects was Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus. a lively funhouse ride set between installments of the Sigourney Weaver era of the series. Romulus is damn good fun, makes for a grand old play sesh in the Aliens toy box. But really, what the fuck was this about, guys? We're all big on practical, oh yeah, except for that one effect that's going to stand out like a bitch. Oh yeah, wonderful. Yeah, really well done. Yeah, banging job, guys. Another fun offering in late August was Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, Blink Twice. A neat little late 90s throwback thriller, it made tabloid hoo-ha for a moment with the admonishment of Kravitz and its star Channing Tatum having met during filming and become an item. They were done by Halloween.
Something horrible is about to happen.
Then, 16 years after it began development, the long gestating remake of The Crow finally arrived for the end of summer. Bill Skarsgård ultimately got the lead after it had previously been announced as Bradley Cooper, Luke Evans, Jack Houston, and Jason Momoa, all of whom had been attached at some point to play Eric Draven, now reimagined as a new sort of rocker brought back from the dead to avenge his fallen lover.
It achieved the near impossible in being almost as bad as the fourth one with Edward Furlong.
How many people have you loved?
I'll never be alone.
August's movies came to a close with Sing Sing, the Coleman Domingo-led drama about a prison theatre troupe that utilised actual members of the real theatre troupe.
It's an incredible movie, and Domingo is fantastic in it.
So, King Lear just fell off of a library cart and you just happened to pick it up and read a few pages.
Yeah, shit funny, right?
The September multiplex run, generally the dying throes as the kids go back to school, began with one last punchy summer bang in Beetlejuice.
Thanks to Kevin Smith, we'd known of Warner Brothers' interest in reviving Beetlejuice for nearly 3 decades.
So it wasn't too much of a surprise when this full-blown Tim Burton-made Lego sequel arrived and felt like a world-appropriate Frankenstein's monster of years of aborted earlier scripts.
It was enough to lure in the Hot Topic crowd and their mums, though, and with pretty positive reviews to boot, it wound up a solid box office hit.
Is that Beetlejuice?
Over on streaming, meanwhile, Netflix dropped the latest offering from Blue Ruin and Green Room director Jeremy Saulnier with a delightfully violent genre throwback, Rebel Ridge. Packing a whopper of a coming-out performance for lead Aaron Pierre, Rebel Ridge benefited from recent years of high-profile police brutality incidents and ripped from contemporary civil forfeiture stories to become the modern-day answer to First Blood.
What if we just walk away?
Well, now you're starting to talk.
I was like, nah.
Now, by this point in the real world in 2024, online incel overlord Andrew Tate had recently been detained by Romanian police as part of an investigation into trafficking, sex with a minor, money laundering, and witness tampering. So it did James McAvoy the world of good when he kicked off his press rounds this month for the American remake of Speak No Evil, amidst claims of basing his performance on none other than King Cobra himself.
The film, directed by James Watkins, did pretty well. The reviews were good, McAvoy was a blast in it, and it took home a tidy $75 million on a budget of $15.
I know we can both be...
A bit much. God, no, really. I mean, you guys have been...
Just a breath of fresh air. Oh, well, that is very sweet of you to say.
At the Toronto International Film Festival this year, Kate Winslet took to the red carpet for her Lee Miller biopic entitled Lee, with the film arriving in UK cinemas just a few days later. The war photographer biopic gave us another powerhouse Kate Winslet performance and a great sense of immersive authenticity, but it felt more like a highlight reel of Miller's life than a cohesive story.
Well, I think it's safe to say you're getting the hang of this.
You think?
It's damn good.
Elsewhere at Toronto this year, Mike Flanagan's latest Stephen King project, The Life of Chuck, won the People's Choice Award, with Honora and Jack Audiard's Emilia Perez also being the year's big swinging dicks.
But another premiere at TIFF, and availing itself of the requisite awards-qualifying theatrical run before dropping on streaming thereafter, was the documentary comedy Will and Harper.
Will and Harper focuses on Will Ferrell and his friendship with longtime colleague and recently transitioned transgender woman Harper Steele as the pair road trip across the US and explore the treatment of the trans community en route.
We've not done one fun thing. Name one fun thing we've done.
This month also saw a new Kevin Smith story arrive in the 4:30 movie, a nostalgia-soaked coming-of-age dramedy that exists entirely because Smith himself outright bought his childhood movie theatre and thought to use it as a location.
It was one for the absolute completists only. It's like Jersey Girling Superbad.
Movies make life make sense. Out here, man, world's full of lies. But in there, they tell the lie that tells the truth.
One that got everybody talking, though, was Caroline Fargeet's The Substance, a slick as fuck Cronenbergian Frankenstein tale of addiction and Faustian bargains. Both Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are amped up and brilliantly unhinged in it. And even though I was outright sick to my stomach here and there, it is just one of the coolest looking movies of the year.
Which, amazingly, I got to say twice in the same week, as The Substance opened on the same day as Strange Darling.
Billed as a thriller in 6 chapters and told out of sequence, Strange Darling starts as a girl meets boy, boy hunts girl slasher tale, but with sharp writing and amazing cinematography from Phoebe's brother from Friends, Giovanni Ribisi. It's just the bangiest of bangers. Willa Fitzgerald is such a find in it. Try as they might, though, neither The Substance nor Strange Darling could prove anywhere near the terrifying ordeal that Megalopolis would turn out to be for so many critics.
Francis Ford Coppola sold his wine empire to self-fund this long-gestating sci-fi passion project.
Only for audiences to barely notice, save for the memification of a particular line delivery from Adam Driver.
So go back to the club.
Still, at least Megalopolis saw the inside of a cinema, which is more than could be said for September's last big release, Hellboy the Crooked Man. Directed by one of the 2 guys responsible for Crank, this 4th Hellboy movie was also its 3rd supposed continuity. Jack Casey was a laughably crap Hellboy, and despite it being made and looking pretty cheaply made at $20 million, it made but 2 in return.
It was a shit show.
Dark things called dark things.
October was Joaquin Phoenix's time to shine, with the 2020 Oscar winner fresh off of the industry tutting that ensued back in August when he'd gotten what he called cold feet, less than a week before filming a gay romance for Todd Haynes, and subsequently getting the film scrapped entirely when he then walked.
It's possible, but it's never been confirmed, that Phoenix's behaviour could have been down to having actually watched Joker Folie à Deux, a thunderingly dull musical sequel to the 2019 edgelord smash, and that wound up making barely as much as its own bloated $200 million budget, before being unceremoniously dumped onto digital platforms within the month.
When I first saw Joker, when I saw you and Murray Franklin, the whole time I was watching, I kept thinking, I hope this guy blows his brains out. And then you did.
But it was undeniably Sebastian Stan's month. Firstly, with the release of A Different Man, in which he played an actor recently recovered from facial reconstructive treatment, and whose jealousy of a rival still afflicted by the same drives him to the brink of psychosis.
Not quite a rom-com, but a fascinating absurdist thriller.
And then it was followed several weeks later by The Apprentice. The biting drama, which depicts Sebastian Stan's Donald Trump in his education and discovery of what'll become the Trump brand, never broke even when it finally got released, but it bagged Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong a Golden Globe nom apiece.
The world is a mess, Tony. You have to fight back. You have to have a tough skin.
Attack, attack, attack. If somebody comes after you with a knife, you shoot him back with a bazooka.
The film's problems, though, would then shift entirely to awards consideration, with the industry increasingly frightened in the wake of a new, oncoming presidential administration. You see, inexplicably, Donald Trump, the twice impeached 45th President of the United States of America and legally defined sexual predator, had gotten himself re-elected to office by November of this year.
Sort of like how David Tennant's Doctor Who, and then it's someone else, and then it's David Tennant again. Except shit.
And news of this new administration and bracing for its subsequent vendettas meant a tightening of the Hollywood sphincter. There were a few little warning signs at first, talent cowering like Jack Black or Rachel Ziegler, and then there was the fear shown Sebastian Stan, who Variety would back up when he claimed that none of this year's potential awards nominees would take part in the publication's seasonal Actors on Actors program alongside him.
Which is about as difficult to stomach as most of the shit being flung around in Damien Leone's Terrifier 3.
The grisly, low-budget Splatterfest series had become a viral hit with the release of its second feature 2 years ago,
so expectations were pretty high for the Christmas-themed threequel.
And they were evidently met with the vaudevillian antics of Art the Clown and another successful viral marketing campaign, propelling the $2 million budget of Terrifier 3 to just under 90 at the box office. Amidst outcry from fans that its studio hadn't bothered marketing it, animated Transformers prequel Transformers 1 bounded sheepishly into cinemas in mid-September.
I know, it's basically retro to shit-talk the Transformers franchise in this day and age, and it is low-hanging fruit, but when the series itself goes for said fruit so often, you feel the need to just bring up the old classics for old time's sake, you know, like the excavator testicles.
I am directly below enemy scrotum.
Or the laminated statutory rape get out of jail free card.
Statute 2705-3.
What? Texas statute?
When they made Anthony Hopkins say dude.
Yes, but you want to know, don't you, dude?
At any rate, Transformers 1 limped on at the box office and failed to make its budget back. Though it would start something of a weird trend for the rest of the year in having the hero and ultimate villain start out as besties.
What is that? Is it getting bigger?
Or closer.
At the other end of the animated spectrum was the much better received adaptation of Peter Brown's best-selling children's book, The Wild Robot. The story of a robot stranded in the wilderness and who befriends the local wildlife was a hit with both kids and adults.
It was a bit of a tearjerker, and it wound up being a much-needed break from the intensity of the rest of the month.
Your dialect is not in my databanks. Tell your people not to worry. Rosin 7134 will sort out this language barrier in no time.
The last mainstream horror offering out the gate in time for Halloween this year was Smile 2.
Sequel to the surprise 2022 hit made more surprising by anybody actually remembering that it happened.
Basically The Ring with a scary smile, it drew acclaim for its opening sequence featuring Strange Darling's Kyle Gallner, proved a decent hit and drew buzzy write-ups for its star Naomi Scott.
He was smiling at me.
The final tentpole of the month, though, was the second Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-off of the year.
The trilogy-capping Venom: The Last Dance. This time out, Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock and his CG alien goose sidekick find themselves fugitives.
With the people chasing them, presumably including people from Marvel Studios, wanting to know just what the fuck is going on by this stage.
But it was more campy fun with Tom Hardy.
Nice to see you.
Surprise, Horsey! I love Horsey!
Cillian Murphy began November by answering the lingering question of just why he'd been so damn weird on the Oppenheimer press tour back in 2023.
Well, in 2024 we got the answer in the form of the film he'd been making at the time. Small things like these.
An 80s set kitchen sink drama about a coal merchant experiencing the horrors of the Irish laundry houses.
If you want to get on in this life, there are things you have to ignore.
And don't look to the world of superheroes to lift your spirits. Oh no. Because the very same day of small things like these came the Christopher Reeve documentary Superman. Absolutely heartbreaking, the film would contrast its subject's rise and subsequent fall from stardom against his recovery from the tragic accident he'd be so known for, as well as exploring his friendship with the late, great Robin Williams.
The first project to be released under James Gunn's DC Films banner at Warner Brothers, Superman's a total heartbreaker.
And there was this one young boy who had tried to wean, but failed. And I would try to speak to him and speak to his mom, but he was just adamant. He was so clear, I don't want to fail again. And Chris went and spoke to him. And the boy simply said, Christopher Reeve spoke to me, I'm going to wean.
Saoirse Ronan's Oscar project this year handily brought back Steve McQueen for good measure as the pair teamed up for Blitz, a visually stunning drama you'd be lucky to see, to be honest. As it was an Apple release, it seemed to be in cinemas for a minute and then onto the Apple TV app for subscribers the following week. The release dates didn't make a whole heap of sense, to be honest.
All of which was a damn shame because Blitz is superb. Ronan, her on-screen son, Elliot Heffernan are both terrific, and it's a really engaging London war drama.
Be brave and stand up to bullies. What do we always say about them?
All math and no trousers.
Pardon? I didn't hear what you said. Speak up, please.
All math and no trousers.
Correct. Come here.
It was a packed weekend, though, and a messy time to drop the film, particularly as so much critical gaze was going to be heaped that weekend upon Sean Baker's Nora, which had already been killing on the festival circuit. It stars former Scream villain Mikey Madison as the eponymous sex worker Nora, whose impulsive marriage to the son of a Russian oligarch sees her dragged across Manhattan for one wild night. Now, Madison's a revelation, and she commits hard to the bit.
And with Baker directing, it was always bound for Cardigan Love come awards season.
Why?
Hey, now can you tell him to fucking untie
Why
me?
did you? Why did you tie her hands?
Untie me.
Look. Why are you afraid of this little
tell
girl?
him to
She's
fucking
an
untie me?
animal. She's a fucking little girl. She beat you both up.
Though nobody ever suspected Hugh Grant would be bound for horror. And that's what we finally got in Heretic, which was a gleefully nasty A24 joint in which old Hugh confines and torments a pair of young Mormon women.
Featuring probably the finest musical diatribe since Patrick Bateman's Huey Lewis rant.
Iterations. Over time. Diluting the message. Obscuring the original.
Continuing the year's trend toward ignoring prominent star directors and their passion projects, though, and now 91-year-old Clint Eastwood would join the distinguished like of Kevin Costner and Francis Ford Coppola with the release of his supposedly final work, the thriller Juror No. 2. Intended by Warner Brothers for a direct release to streaming platform HBO Max, the studio then relented and continued plans for a theatrical release here in the UK, with only 50 screens seeing the film released in the US, and Warner's declaring pointedly that they would not be reporting box office figures.
Having worked for the studio for 49 years, banking them 4 Oscars and a further 10 nominations, this was how Warner Brothers chose to end their partnership with Clint Eastwood.
What are you telling me? Maybe I didn't hit a deer.
Though nobody especially noticed thanks to the release of one of the year's most anticipated movies, a little threequel called Paddington in Peru.
Following everyone's favourite bear being given the cinematic anointment of none other than Nicolas Cage.
Paddington 2 is incredible.
I fucking told you.
The third Paddington movie took the Brown family to Paddington's homestead of Peru. And with Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas along for the ride, it didn't even matter to audiences that director Paul King and even Mrs. Brown actress Sally Hawkins declined to return, but numbers are being kept pretty low-key until it opens in the US in mid-January.
Marmalade! Shouldn't someone be driving?
Somebody who was keeping an eye on Paddington, though, was Dwayne Johnson, whose Christmas action comedy Red One would also debut in cinemas the same day.
You'd be remiss in thinking that nobody would be stupid or self-deluded enough to try and release a family-focused movie in the United Kingdom on the same day as the third Paddington movie. However, that sort of thinking simply does not apply to Dwayne Douglas Johnson. Johnson, whose brand as a movie star had taken a critical beating in recent years, attempted to apply his usual flavour of kayfabe-inspired theatrics to the marketing for the boilerplate festive romp, hitting the usual markers of tequila plugs and energy drink promos.
It was in a promo for the film's release in IMAX, however, the former Rocky Maivia evidently overstepped the line when he told the camera of how he'd sat in cherished director Christopher Nolan's favourite IMAX seat to watch Oppenheimer, only to realise...
Holy shit. This thing, Red One, on this screen, with this technology, it's gonna be game over.
For the grown-ups though, never fear, Gladiator was here. Yes, after decades of false starts, Gladiator 2 fought its way out of Tartarus and came blazing into cinemas in the year of our Lord 2024. And it was pretty solid. Everybody seemed to agree that Denzel stole the show, and a lot was said about sharks in the Colosseum.
But the sequel ultimately worked, in spite of a lackluster lead in Paul Mescal.
I happen to have, with good fortune and not a little skill, the remaining emperors here.
In the US, however, Gladiator 2 opened a week later than in the UK, arriving in cinemas there the very same day as the global release of Wicked, the film adaptation of the hit musical and one half of the half-hearted marketing moniker Glicked. Musical fans were given a veritable feast in Wicked, with the Broadway sensation writ large for the screen courtesy of Crazy Rich Asians director John M. Chu, and bolstered by a frankly fucking mystifying set of press rounds with stars Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, who sat through interviews permanently portraying a young couple being talked through a terminal diagnosis. Not that any of the fans minded. Fans of the Wicked stage show, of which the Venn diagram with fans of the Wicked movie is just a straight-up circle, were too busy crying through defying gravity to complain about anything.
In fact, the only complaints to emerge actually came from ordinary cinema goers, horrified by the experience of sharing a cinema screen with them.
With viral stories of fans filming and singing in screens quickly earning backlash. The backlash was so much, in fact, that Cynthia Erivo publicly declared,
"We've spent this long singing it ourselves. It's time for everyone else to join in. It's wonderful." Yeah.
While Dwayne Johnson, clinging desperately to his credibility by this point, added, "You've paid your hard-earned money for a ticket, and you've got into a musical, and you're into it. Sing."
A sentiment we should all remember with the release of Baby Girl on the 10th of January.
Yes, Johnson really needed a PR win after making himself look like such a jackass whilst promoting Red One. And so it was lucky he had the relatively critic-proof Moana 2 in his back pockets for mere weeks later. The sequel, which as we said was constructed from a repurposed Disney Plus series, turned out to be exactly as much of a mess as that would suggest. Kids got what they came for, and so did the Disney shareholders, as it started to hoover up money at the box office. But parents and adults were largely either asleep or sat aghast at the borderline incoherent Oceanic sequel.
So I'm gonna go handle my business.
Wrapping up November, though, was an old-fashioned for-the-adults thriller, adapted from Robert Harris's bestseller Conclave.
The film, which starred Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci among others, follows the high-stakes election of a new pope in the isolated lockdown process of the papal conclave. A buzzy little earner from All Quiet on the Western Front helmet Edward Berger, Conclave was equal parts House of Cards and theological chess match, drawing widespread critical acclaim and with particular love shown through its visuals by cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine.
If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war. And you have to commit to a side.
It was such a sedate start to the year's end that for the first week, the front of house release was Marielle Heller's Night Bitch. Based on the bestseller and starring Amy Adams, Night Bitch is a magical realism-style story of a stay-at-home mother who's either having a breakdown or transforming into a dog. It's very good.
You're an artist, right?
Well, I used to be.
Wow!
But that feels like a lifetime ago. So
Yeah,
totally.
definitely.
We get it. I used to be a stripper.
The before times.
And from there, the usual eclectic end-of-year tentpoles and occasional awards babies began to arrive.
Certainly unlikely to be anyone's idea of an awards baby was the latest installment of the irksome Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-off series, of which Sony were now on their third offering of the year with Kraven the Hunter. Aaron Taylor Johnson stars in this once-intended adaptation of the popular story Kraven's Last Hunt. The key word there being once. Bounced around the release schedule from January 2023 to October 2023 to August 24 to finally December 2024, producer Matt Tolmack at one point claimed this was to get people with time to go back to the movies over and over again. That was a real reflection of how the studio felt about the movie.
4 days prior to the release of Kraven the Hunter, it was revealed that Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man spin-off franchise was dead.
I will remember you.
An actually bizarre kind of the quiet part out loud moment this year was with the full theatrical release of an animated Lord of the Rings film, The War of the Rohirrim. An ancillary story that's set 2 centuries before Peter Jackson's trilogy, Warner Brothers made no secret whatsoever of it existing entirely to retain the feature film rights to the series, and buy Andy Serkis long enough to make that Hunt for Gollum movie for them in 2026.
Yet The War of the Rohirrim's a full-throated 2.5-hour anime epic.
With Brian Cox on the voice cast and director Kenji Kamiyama fully dropping the mic.
All Middle-earth knows the tale of the War of the Ring. But 200 years before that,
Riders of the Mark! Brothers of Rohan!
there was an older tale.
Arise!
It was a month of returns, actually. Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, Santa, Bublé, and naturally enough, Luca Guadagnino.
Yes, having had challenges as delayed as it had been, meant there were now mere months between it and the release of the director's next work, Queer. A self-proclaimed tribute to the films of Merchant Ivory, Queer is the director's adaptation of the 1985 William S. Burroughs novella, and stars Daniel Craig as a man hiding out from the law in Mexico who then falls for an American navalman.
Door's already open, can't close it now. All he can do is look away.
Also returning was not just Wallace and Gromit, but their iconic villain Feathers McGraw too. Vengeance Most Foul sees the evil penguin returning for some Cape Fear fun. It got a limited theatrical release, then broadcast on BBC One on Christmas Day, and then heads to Netflix for the 3rd of January.
What even is society?
Christ, even the dead were making returns this month.
With Disney's bizarrely pitched Barry Jenkins prequel to the 2019 live-action Lion King adaptation, Mufasa. While the little franchise that could blasted back for another go in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, with the Sega gang back and bringing along Keanu Reeves as new villain Shadow the Hedgehog.
There's been a high-level security breach. And we need Team Sonic's immediate assistance. Project Shadow is far beyond anything we've ever encountered.
But the tentpole to end the year on went to, randomly enough, Robbie Williams, who teamed with Greatest Showman director Michael Gracie to headline his own Rocket Man-like musical biopic, Better Man.
And it was damn good fun, with some cracking musical numbers and a bombastic but sincere performance from an animated chimpanzee.
I'll do this fucking baby! Shut up, you tits!
Ah, fuck off, Glenn!
Mother!
But for a year that brought us the Wicked press tour, Brat Summer, and that time Timothée Chalamet showed up to a Timothée Chalamet lookalike contest, I ask you, does a chimp biopic really seem that strange?
What'll be usual, though, will be business at the movies the next year, with a pretty tried and tested predictable roadmap out there.
The excellent Nosferatu will kick off the year with Robert Eggers' Buzzy adaptation arriving the same day in the UK as the non-linear Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield romantic drama We Live in Time. Bridget Jones returns in February, as does Captain America's Shield, now held by Anthony Mackie in the troubled Captain America Brave New World. Unlike this year, in which we only got one, 2025 goes back in on having 3 Marvel Studios releases, the others being Thunderbolts in May, and the Fantastic Four First Steps in July. And DC's getting back in the game, with the James Gunn-directed Superman out next July too. Disney live action's going to keep churning along. There's Snow White in March, and Lilo and Stitch in May, But at least DreamWorks is getting in on the action this year with an equally unexciting How to Train Your Dragon adaptation. And we're going to have a Minecraft movie now, and extraneous spin-offs and sequels for John Wick with Ballerina in June, and then Jurassic World Rebirth in July,
and sequels to Megan, and Saw, and Wicked!
Before we end the year with Zootropolis 2 and Avatar 3, The Fire One. And people think the universe is chaotic.
Well, until all that's happened, I've been Van Cotter, and this has been Roll Credits. Keep it cinematic for another year, and if I see you at the movies, put your damn phones away and don't sing. Bye!